last week, and normally for those of you who know me or familiar with me, you know that I have a very specifically laid out plan every time I come to South Africa. It's my fourth trip in the last 20 months. Spent 4.5 months in South Africa during that time, with a little bit of that time in Botswana, because I used to live in Botswana, so I went there. But is anybody here familiar with me? I think a couple people know me. If you raise your hand if you know who I am. Okay, a couple people. So I should probably introduce myself, as he said. First off, again, thanks to Dr. Hammond. I sent him an email just 2 days ago, or a day and a half ago in the evening, because I hadn't gone to bed yet, and said, hey, I'm back in Cape Town. If you'd like me to come give another lecture, I'm happy to do it. It's a privilege to come speak to the Reformation Society. It's great to be associated with you all. It's really, you do great work, and so it's really a pleasure. But anyway, he responded and said, yeah, come on over, and I'm sure people have questions for you if you'd like to speak this week. I was intending to do it, when I come back to Cape Town at the end of the month, but I'd like to do that as well. We can probably announce that and pick a topic of interest to folks. But I'm Colonel Chris Wyatt, retired from the U.S. Army. I spent 36.5 years in the Army, and 34 of those in active duty. I started as a private, became a sergeant, then went back to university, where I not really focused when I was 17, so I left after a year. Went back to university, earned my degree, came back in the Army as an intelligence officer, spent 30 years from lieutenant to full colonel, so I went from private to full colonel. And a lot of my African students, when I taught at the Army War College, says, Colonel Wyatt, you're so smart, why aren't you a general? And I said, because there's no generals in my career field. The highest you can go is colonel, and I'm okay with that. I didn't join the Army for pride or for rank. I joined it to make a difference in the world. And when I was a young soldier, I was influenced, before I was even a soldier, influenced by a lot that I read. I followed events in Rhodesia and in Mozambique and Angola and Southwest Africa when I was a youth, and the wars that were being fought, liberation, and the frontline states the South African government was dealing with, and I was fascinated by it. It was an interesting time in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, and so that sparked my interest in Africa. But then I read a book by James Michener, who's a historical fiction writer. He's passed now, but he wrote dozens of books, and he would take real people and real events and intertwine fictional characters with them to weave a story to tell about something. He wrote Texas, space, Hawaii, a bunch of other ones, Poland. But the book that got my attention, I think it was around 1980 when I was in high school, was The Covenant. The Covenant was about South Africa. And of course the Covenant is about Geloof de Dag, the Day of the Vow, and the Battle of Blood River. That was for the title for the Covenant, where the Trekboers made a covenant, a pact with God if they were delivered from this threat, that they would build a church in his honor. And they eventually did in Pietermaritzburg. But that really, I'm like, wow, what a crazy, fascinating country South Africa is with all these people. And that was a fiction book, and that's what inspired me. And since that time, I've been to South Africa probably over 500 times. I live next door in Botswana. I used to come over every weekend. And I have a great affinity for South Africa. Those who know me know that I put a lot of effort into research and knowledge of South Africa and the region. So that's a little bit about me there. I retired from, well, I should say, in the Army. I was in the Signal Corps as an enlisted soldier. Then I was Air Defense when I was in the Reserve at University for the National Guard. I came back as an intelligence officer. I served as a tactical intelligence officer, a signals intelligence officer, a counterintelligence agent, and a strategic intelligence officer all over the world. 3 tours in Germany, 1 in Italy. In Africa, I've been stationed in Tunisia, Liberia, Botswana, Malawi, Niger, Mauritania, Uganda, and Ethiopia. I worked at the African Union. I hunted terrorists. I built schools and clinics, ran HIV programs, Ebola research programs, taught militaries to obey the rule of law, the law of land warfare, trained the Somali National Force. That's not something to be proud of, I suppose, but did train them. Rebuilt the armed forces of Liberia after the 13-year civil war. And they've been largely a force for good, so I'm actually kind of happy about that. Redesigned the intelligence infrastructure of the Botswana Defense Force so they would stop spying on their citizens and spy on threats to the nation and national security. And it's a very interesting career. I'm a published author in academic circles with Stellenbosch University, as well as with the Army War College and in popular press. And if you read the Daily Friend, you would have seen my article yesterday about U.S. and the ANC, about foreign policy. It appeared in the Daily Friend yesterday for the Institute of Race Relations. So I retired in 2019 and I started consultancy. I thought it'd be a really interesting idea if I tried to get American businesses to invest in Africa, because in my view that's the next big thing for growth economically on the planet. By 2050 there'll be 2.4 billion people in Africa, and that's even with people leaving to go to Europe and elsewhere. So the economic growth is going to be here. By my own estimation, for about 10 years I've estimated there will be about 900 million consumers with disposable income in Africa by the year 2050. That's about 3 times the current population of the United States, and we don't even have 300 million consumers there. So if people want to be successful and have a good economy going forward, I think they should focus on Africa. So I try to get American businesses to do that. And then as soon as I started that, because I retired in October 2019, the COVID scam started and I couldn't travel. So I had to do something. So what I did is I said, you know what, I've got a YouTube channel and I've been restricted from using it because as an intelligence officer, I can't just be putting things on YouTube. So I decided to take that channel and make some strategic videos. I made my first video, I think, was about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the impact and what it really meant. Then I did a video in which I interviewed the program manager for a contractor that worked for me in Liberia about rebuilding our force Liberia, and it went from there. So in February of 2020, I had 2 subscribers on YouTube for a channel that was 15 years old because I had not put much effort into it. And by November, I had 23,000 subscribers. I had 10 to 15,000 views per day. I was making money, even though that wasn't my intent on the channel. And people were learning who I was, and I was trying, I want to say forcing, but convincing people to start thinking critically, because that seems to be a lost art in society. And I challenged people. I said, you can challenge me on my facts, you can challenge me on my analysis, but you'll find that I actually know what I'm talking about and I research what I'm talking about. I'm not some guy sitting on a lawn chair eating crisp and drinking a beer and just sharing my views. I actually have lived experience, and I spent 30 years as an intelligence analyst, and I cover all kinds of things. So anyway, that's enough about me. So now you know where I'm from and why I'm here. So I come here to do meet and greets with my viewers, to do public lectures, to appear on radio and television, which I've done here, and also cover events. My last trip was 8 months ago. I wasn't able to come sooner, and I'll explain why in a moment. Because I came 8 months ago and I covered the BRICS Summit as an accredited journalist. I was there covering that. And then I also covered the multi-party charter. I was at Kempton Park for that event. Interviewed excuse me, the leaders of just about every party there, including John Steenhuisen from the DA, and Neil de Beer, Labisa, and a host of others. So the reason I didn't come in January, February, which was my intent, is that the incumbent for the state legislature in my state decided to run for the Senate because the seat was vacant. So 7 Republicans jumped into the field. I was one of them. I said, well, now's the time to run. I can't sit around and not do something. We need good moral people to actually be in government. So I ran. I refused donations. I figured, let me take the risk. I'll use my savings. And I drained a couple savings accounts and ran up a couple big credit card bills, one of which I'll pay in a couple days. And I refused donations because I didn't think it was fair to ask people to give money when there's 5 candidates in the race. You don't know who's going to win. It's like a gamble going to Vegas. So I ran that race and I lost. Lost badly, actually. I came in 4th. I just barely beat a 22-year-old. So, what I discovered is the following, is that I'm not a neophyte. I'm also a political scientist and historian, and I'm not naive. I know how dirty politics can be, but I was actually shocked at how dirty and dishonest politics at that local level could be. I expected it for Congress or for the Senate or the president, what they do to Trump. But at the local level, I was just gobsmacked. So the guy who won the race actually broke the law on multiple occasions. The Republican Party was aware of it and took no action. This is a primary for the Republican candidate. And I was kind of dismayed by that. But let me tell you something about voters, and this is why. So before the election was over, our primary is April 23rd, my viewers a lot were concerned because I do a daily news program, and a lot of people around the world, particularly in South Africa, rely on my news because I go through the global headlines. I read the news in English, French, German, and Afrikaans, and then I present the news that the media reports, and then I destroy the op-ed that's disguised as news, and I give analysis of what I believe is going to happen. And I'm not boasting. You can check. My track record's pretty good at predicting things. For instance, I predicted the ANC would come in November 2021 after the municipal election. They would do no better than 38 to 42% in this election. Right now, it's holding at about 42. So we'll see if I'm right, but that was my prediction 2.5 years ago. Not like these pundits are just coming out now when they're seeing polls going, oh yeah, the ANC's going to get 42%. That's nice. You didn't do the analysis. You're just following the news. But so my audience was very concerned that if I got elected to the legislature, I wouldn't be doing this. I told them, I said, if I'm elected to the legislature in November when the general election is, don't worry, I will go to the ethics department and confirm whether I can still continue to do the broadcasting or not. It might be a question if it's monetized, I couldn't do it. And I said, no, then I won't monetize it. Anyway, so I told them, I said, come April 23rd, I will just be happy that the primary is over. because I won't be running anymore and I won't be spending money and I can take a break. If I win, great, then I'll compete for the fall and I'll win because it's a heavily conservative district. If I don't win, then I go back to doing what I do every day, which I never stopped doing. So I was fine with losing, but let me tell you something about people who vote, and it's apropos because you just had an election yesterday, and sometimes the electorate would make you shake your head. And this goes back to being moral. So these are two anecdotal stories I want to share with you very quickly. So the first one is that one of my volunteers, a young man who came to the debate we had, didn't know any of the candidates, and after listening to my performance was jazzed up, didn't have any contact information from me, went on LinkedIn, found my profile, sent me a letter, said, Colonel Wyatt, I'm inspired by your campaign. I want to help any way I can. I don't have any money, but I have time because I just moved back up here from Georgia. So I reached out to him, and then I went to his house and spoke to him. But that young man at our polling station in Fairview for one of our precincts talked to me after the election. He said, Colonel Wyatt, you're never going to believe this. I said, what happened, Mickey? He said, well, there's an older lady who came to the polling station, and I gave her your poem card, the information about the candidate and your positions. And she goes, oh, I know who the colonel is. I think I'm going to vote for him. So she went in to vote. She came back out a few minutes later. It's a very slow polling station, not like what you saw yesterday. And so she went over to him and said, he said, well, so you voted? She said, yes. Did you vote for the colonel? No, I voted for the Christian. So my volunteer was kind of put off. What do you mean you voted for the Christian? Colonel Wyatt's a Christian. Well, Colonel Wyatt's very impressive, lots of accomplishments, but he was in the Army when Obama was president. And Obama was importing Muslims to America, so I voted for the real Christian. What? You can't make this up. So if I'm to blame for something that someone perceives as wrong, not that that should be wrong, but perceive that as wrong, then do I get the credit for all the great things that Clinton and Bush and Trump and Obama did? No. And then this is the one that disturbed me, really disturbed me. So at another polling station, one of my volunteers, who's an older gentleman, so he's speaking to the older voters coming in, and 3 different elderly ladies came through, and they had mentioned they were interested in voting for me, and then they come out of the booth a few minutes later, and these 3 different women throughout the course of the day said, well, I didn't vote for the colonel. And why not? Well, he supports abortion. And my volunteer said, excuse me, where did you hear that at? And to each of them, I'm on record on national broadcast, on video, on Alex Newman's Sentinel Report, on my program, thousands of times, in print, in articles I've written, publicly declaring that an abortion is the murder of an American citizen in the womb. My job as a soldier was to protect life and liberty, and that includes the unborn. So I think that kind of succinctly says my position about abortion. Yet somebody was telling voters in that precinct that I support abortion, and they believed it. So I'm not at all upset that I lost the election. If that's the intelligence of the electorate, then I can't really combat that. What can you say, right? All right, so we could talk about a host of things. You can ask me any question about any topic. I think you'll find that on most topics, I'm probably pretty familiar with it. And if it's a topic I'm not familiar with, give me a couple hours, I'll come back and I'll answer your questions. You'll think I've been a lifelong expert on it, trust me. I had to do that as an intelligence analyst to be able to adapt and ingest information and reach conclusions pretty quickly. So you're probably curious about our election, but let me share with you my reflections on yesterday's election. Is that fair? Can we do that? As an outsider, I have no dog in this fight, if you like that phrase. And I have nothing to gain or lose here because I don't vote in South Africa. I don't own things here in South Africa. I have no vested interest other than my personal interest in South Africans and your success. All right, so admittedly, I was only here in the Western Cape in the Cape Town metropolitan area. So that's an anecdotal view of the election. Was it in Limpopo or Eastern Cape or Gauteng? But what I saw yesterday, we'll talk about the results in a second, but let me talk about the conduct of the election. Okay, first off, congratulations. I saw peaceful, professional, polite people of all races and ethnicities at the 10 polling stations that I went to who interacted and all got along. The political parties weren't fighting each other. The voters were polite, considerate. The police had a solid presence everywhere I went, particularly in Khayelitsha. There were plenty of police around. They weren't intimidating anybody. They were just there for presence, for deterrence. And I think it was an incredibly successful election from that standpoint. In President Ramaphosa's political speech, message to the nation on Sunday, sorry, it's a political speech anyway, on Sunday, he asked people to be peaceful, and it paid off. People were peaceful. But there were problems, and I think some of you may experience that. So I started my day, I was staying in Parklands, I drove down to Somerset West, I started my day there. 9:45 I arrived, there were 800 people in line waiting to go in. And the place had been open for nearly 3 hours. The line moved very slowly initially, and then it picked up some pace. But when I left, there was still about 500 or 600 people in line, but continuous motion. I went from there, I joined the Action SA candidate for Premier Western Cape is Angela Sobey, and she was there. So I went with her to Kailicha, went to 5 different polling stations. From there, I was going to depart and head off on my own to Rondebosch, and she said, well, I'm going to Monenberg, since it's on the way. She said, why don't you come with me there, because she was born there and raised there as a child. So I went there, and then came here, met up with the referendum party. I did it again. The referendum party, and Phil Craig and Donald Brown, a few other candidates, and watched over here at the primary school, and down this way, whichever it is. And then I went from there to Sea Point with Phil Craig. I followed him there, and then we parted ways. From there, I went to Parklands, and it was after 8 p.m. at Parklands. There were over 1,000 people, 3 people abreast, 4 people abreast, completely wrapped around the church, all the way around the building. They were starting a second row of people going around the building at 8 o'clock at night. It was hectic. From there, I went to Woodbridge Primary as well, and that place was packed too, but it was moving pretty smoothly. And then I went to my last visit, because it was after 8, and they're supposed to close at 9. I went to Tableview High School. 1,400 people standing in line after 8 o'clock. Crazy. I met a couple of people. Another nice thing about coming to South Africa is, and this is probably why I can't shave my beard, I keep threatening to shave it because I'm not necessarily a fan of it, but I'm kind of instantly recognizable by people who know me. And last night, 5 times I'm walking down the street, hey Chris! Hey, how you doing? People recognize me for my program. And it's the same thing last night, people coming up to me. And so I talked to those folks and asked them how the voting was going, but I also talked to voters after they voted and said, what was your experience? It was hit and miss with the election. The rules, I think the problem, from my perception, my analysis, media analysis, is that there must be very inconsistent. Now, I have a basis for this. I'm a judge of elections back home. I wasn't for this election because I was running, so I had to recuse myself. But I'm a judge of elections, so I'm responsible for the voting station and the conduct of it, and the training of the workers. And I can tell you that it seems very apparent that the IEC did not do adequate training for the people who were running the polling stations. They were inconsistent. Some were fantastic, and there was fantastic polling station in Kailicha, there were fantastic polling station at Woodbridge, and then there were crappy ones all over the place. And last night I did a broadcast after I came back. I started it around 9 o'clock when the polls were supposed to be closing, and they were still open in many places. I had a pretty large audience last night, hundreds of people watching live as I summarized what I saw and my projections and what I thought was going to happen, which we can talk about if you want. And 75% of my viewers, and most viewers commented, they voted, 75% of my viewers last night had an excellent experience around the country, all over the country, even in Mpumalanga, Eastern Cape. A lot of them were in and out in 20 minutes or less. Things worked, but the 25% who didn't have a good experience, I had one of my viewers that spent 7 hours at Tuxer, Unisa, waiting to vote. 7 hours. That's insane. It's just so he could vote against the ANC, because he hates ANC. He's a Tswana speaker, and he was not happy with the ANC from Northwest. So that's crazy. That's hectic. And that's just a problem. Another problem I saw, this one I'm kind of irritated with as an outside observer, and as an American, it really irritates me because as a judge of elections, I would never tolerate this. Apparently you have rules, I don't know the rules exactly, at polling stations. The elderly over age 60 are supposed to be able to jump the queue and go to the front. Pregnant women and those with prams with small children can jump the queue, as well as the disabled. That was highly inconsistent yesterday. I saw places where elderly people waited for a long time. They didn't get to go to the front of the queue. I saw other places where poll workers came out, walked around, found a lady with a pram. Ma'am, we'll take you to the front of the line. Or an elderly person with a cane. Sir, let me take you this way. You get to come front. You don't have to wait here all this time. So very inconsistent. But all in all, let's see what we get from the IEC results in the end. But I would say as an outside observer, congratulations to all of you on a peaceful and successful election. It didn't get extended for a day, which would have undermined the credibility of it, I think. It was completed last night. And congratulations to anybody here who voted and had to wait an interminable amount of time. Voting is important. You addressed this, Dr. Hammond, a while ago. Voting is so important to me, and maybe it's an illusion. Maybe we're taking the red pill and the blue pill. I don't know. But voting is so important to me that when I was turned 18, so I was 17 at university, and I was active in the Republican Party. I was conservative, from the very beginning. I'm not a lunatic liberal who grew up when I got older. I've been conservative my entire life. So, because many people are like that. They become conservative when they realize that, oh my goodness, there's faith, family, and flag actually matter. But I was 17 at university, and I was so into politics and how important it was to our nation that I ran the campaign for a classmate to become a city councilman in Athens, Ohio. He was the first ever in the 180-year history of Ohio University student to be elected to city council. I wasn't even eligible to vote when I ran his campaign. We were successful, so I learned a lot about that. But when I turned 18 on Christmas Day, my first election was the primary election in the spring. I was working in the cafeteria for minimum wage, and I was supposed to be finished at 7. The polls closed at 7:30. My supervisor wouldn't let me go because the work wasn't done, and I gotta go. Wouldn't let me go. So finally, about 8 minutes after 7, he let me go, punched my card, got on my bicycle, motored across the campus, got to the convocation center where they play basketball, and it's an arena like this, and the precinct tables were all around there for the campus. So I'm walking in, there's my table. There's nobody there. There's a lady at the next table. I said, did he go to the bathroom? Oh no, he left. I said, man, it's not 7:30. I guess you have to go to the courthouse. Out the building, on my bicycle, jetting up this huge hill in Athens, Ohio. If you ever go there, you'll see it's a huge hill. But I was 17 or 18, I was fit. So I get up there. This is a true story. I like to embellish my stories, but this is factual 100%. Courthouse doors, down the bottom, or the Board of Elections, bottom left-hand side of the courthouse. I walked up the door, I threw it open. I've been disenfranchised! Well, calm down, young man, calm down. So they happened to be the chairman of the Board of Elections and the county commissioner were there, and they put me in a room, not a padded room, but they did put me in a room. And they came in and they said, what happened? I said, well, look, it's 7:28. There's nobody at my polling station. I just got up here from the convocation center. I said, I got cheated. I want to vote. I said, oh, there's a process for that. And that's when I discovered what a provisional ballot was, all the way back in 1983. So that's how important I take elections. So if you stood in line yesterday, God bless you. It's important. It may not seem like it, but it's important. In 2021, I encouraged South Africans. I had more coverage of those elections than any of your media outlets, and you can go back and look. I interviewed 40 candidates from 8 different political parties and the leaders of 6 political parties in this country. And I did coverage of municipal elections for months on end, 4 months intensive coverage of leading up to it, trying to get South Africans to vote, and 31% of y'all went out and voted. And the reason I said that is because the one place where people see in South Africa, because your system, the actual instantiation of governance is at the local level. Because it's your councils who make sure your rubbish is taken care of, that your rates are dealt with, that you address your complaints. They're supposed to coordinate with law enforcement and sewage and water, all that stuff. I mean, Parliament, they're not touching that stuff. They're affecting your lives, but you don't see it every day. But if you want to see your community improve, you get a better council. You get rid of the dirtbags. Well, in KwaZulu-Natal, my argument was borne out. The IFP gained 2% more voters, yet they gained 15 new city councils. They controlled 24 councils. They eventually lost a couple, they got a couple more back in by-elections. And they had a chance to prove to the electorate that we, the IFP, are honest, transparent, not opaque, and dishonest like the ANC. We will govern, and we can get you results. Now, whether they have or not, we can debate that. I don't think they have. But they had a chance. And the other opposition parties had a chance too. But in my view, they failed because they didn't turn out voters. Yesterday, I don't know what the final is going to be. People are banning about 68, 70% turnout. And I don't have an example because I haven't been in country for one of your elections previously. I've been in other countries for elections, but here, I was incredibly impressed by the number. If it was a surge at 7 o'clock in the morning, that's normal for polling. People want to get there. It's still a work day for us. They want to go vote in the morning and be done with it. But here, it was consistent the whole day in most of the polling stations. So again, congratulations on that. I don't know where each of you stand in parties. That's your personal prerogative and choice. But in November 2021, as I said, and this is before you had the gift of 300 days of load shedding last year. Thank you for that, ESCOM. And before the instantiation of the MK party, which has devastated the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. But once they came around, I knew that was going to happen because I predicted they would do poorly in 2021 because of the July insurrection, which the ANC did nothing to stop. And I think some people in the government facilitated, no evidence of it, but all indicators are there. So I predicted 38 to 42% at best, and it looks like that's going to be close to where they come out at. On some of these other parties, I made more recent predictions. I'm close on most of those, but it's analysis. I've analyzed elections for years, among other things, and but you know, even if you're a smart person, you get things wrong. So I did a video about 6 weeks ago in which I drew up potential coalitions. One of them I termed the Armageddon Coalition. The Armageddon Coalition is if the ANC gets too few votes and they have to go into a coalition with the EFF that they don't want to, and the MK party. And that would just be the destruction of South Africa at a much faster pace. And I had other coalitions. So none of them are particularly good, folks. And I caution you this, even if an opposition coalition, plurality, not a majority, or majority, seems unlikely, forms a government and rules this country in the near term, good luck, but don't expect change immediately. The bureaucracy is stuffed full of patronage hires, many of whom are functionally illiterate or incompetent at their jobs, who've been hired not based on their competence, but based on their loyalty and fealty to the African National Congress and the Thule House. They will owe allegiance to the people who put them in their positions. And just like the people in our bureaucracy who undermine the Trump administration illegally and often by ignoring orders from the executive branch, there's a likelihood that you'll have that. It'll take time. You can't just fire the entire bureaucracy overnight. Even the ANC didn't do that and get rid of everybody that worked in the National Party government. It took time to push most of those people out. So I'm not trying to give you gloom and doom. I'm just trying to say be patient. If the ANC is no longer your national government, it's going to take time. And this is certain. The ANC is not going to rule in Western Cape. In KZN, the ANC can only rule if they ally with the MK party, which is possible. And in Gauteng, the ANC may not rule at all. So there's a very real chance the ANC will not, for the first time, not control 3 provinces.